body to integrate yourself. I'm your host, Allison Pillow, and you can find me at pureenergypdx.com. Today, I'm here with a really good friend, Eugene Trufkin. He has been on my podcast before. He has a book called Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide, which is a great guide and manual to help you find high quality, organic, and non-GMO foods in a day and time where labeling can be very, very confusing. And this is a book that I always recommend to my clients so that they have it, you could put it in your bag and have it at the grocery store as a reference as to how to find really high quality food. So thank you so much for coming on today, Eugene. It's really awesome to have you. We've been talking back and forth about certain issues over this past year that have been going on in the health industry. Really interesting stuff that's happening. But ultimately, what we always want to get back to is our food quality. And that's what is going to dictate the nature of our health and how we respond to stress, right? So I would love to talk today about if you could start just about your book and sharing a little bit about that, as well as, let's get into how people can use your book and how you recommend using it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me on again.
Yeah.
So for your listeners, this is actually our second take. Me and Allison recorded like 10 minutes of the episode without pressing the record button. And I was just telling her how I recorded one episode one time completely through without remembering to record it actually. And then I pressed the record button. It's like started recording. I'm like, what? And then I was telling her I gave up on podcasting for like 3 months after that, because I thought it wasn't for me. But yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the book I try to write my books like very to the point, and I get like a huge storytelling and giving a lot of information. But I found like one thing annoying about a lot of fitness books is they're just like too overwhelming. And I feel like a lot of times like a 50-page chapter could easily be like a 2-page chapter, and you can still get the message across and far more clearly to the audience member than kind of making, going on and on and on about the minutia and the details of whatever you're trying to convey to the audience. So my book is just very to the point. It's actually mostly pictures. It's very little writing. And it also mainly comes with, it's roughly like an 80-page book. And it mainly comes with a lot of video tutorials. So at the end of like a 3-page chapter, 4-page chapter, you need to kind of log in to the videos and just watch the video on that chapter where basically like I take a person through the grocery store and I tell them exactly what all the labels mean and don't mean. The different categories, like for instance, with chicken, there's the no label, there's the cage-free, free range, pasture raised, and then various levels of integrity of each one of those categories. And I kind of break it down into detail with showing them like videos of, hey, this is what a caged operation looks like. These are the type of vaccines, medicines, and drugs and type of feed they use in this operation. Then let's go over to the free range operation. This is exactly what it looks like. And it shows them a video footage of a typical free range operation. And these are what kind of drugs are used, what kind of medicines are used, what kind of feed is used. And then it's up to the listener or reader to decide, what kind of product they want for themselves, So there's a lot of choices, and it's up to them to decide the positives and negatives of each category and then just to go with that. And it's all like very simple language. I don't use any complicated terminology because that's just not the way I like to learn material. I think it was Einstein that always said like the best thing you can do as a teacher is always take like a very complicated subject and make it very simple to understand. And that shows like mastery in the subject. And I feel that's very important to do with reading material. So that's how I try to build out the book basically.
I completely agree with that. And that's what I love about your book, because it does have really great illustrations, like you're saying, like it gives people, because when we're at the grocery store, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing these things, right? So we might as well like be able to have that reference in the book. And then Yeah, I mean, it's already complicated enough. Like the labeling is already so complicated and hard to understand. Like you might as well help people, by making it more simple and understandable. And so that's what I love about your book, because it's really a decoder in a way of, what all this stuff means. It's gotten pretty complicated as organic food has become more popular. And, I feel like food manufacturers kind of always want to, they always want to sell and not spend as much. They're trying to always use the food labels to, make people think that it's something that it's not, or healthier than it is. And so it's good to know, be able to discern between all of those kinds of labels. And so I love in your book how you go through the different kinds of eggs, and there's like, I don't know, 5 different kinds of eggs that you would see at the grocery store, right? Like feel like sometimes they have cage free, sometimes they have soy free, sometimes they are organic cage free. There's just a lot of options. And so it can be really confusing. But in your book, you tell people, like you said, like what I love about it is that you really break it down into what all of those mean and what that means for how the animal's living, what they're being fed, which is really great. It's really great to have that. And because like many people aren't going to do the research, right? They're not going to do the research to find that stuff out. They're just going to buy what they think is sounds good, you know?
Yeah, and I researched it, including working on various regenerative farms like Five Bar Beef, happy-hens.com, um, Bluebird Canyon Farms as well. I also kind of was raised by my grandmother on a biodynamic farm as well. So there's like there's basically in the US, it took me about like 4 years of spending about like 15 to 20 hours a week. Luckily, I work part-time, so I was able to commit that time. And it was kind of a passion project of mine at the time. Like for me, it all started with just wanting um, healthy eggs that my grandma kind of raised me on. And I'm still looking for those in the US. If anyone can find them, that would be great. Well, there's actually a really good company. There is a company called happy-hens.com. It's in Ramona, California, and they do sell their eggs at Whole Foods locations, I believe, still in the Southern California area. So it's limited, but it's just very hard to find really good, high quality, like for example, poultry products, eggs, pork, and turkey. And I can go into the details of why that's the case, but I don't know
Yeah,
if you
let's
guys want
do
to
that.
cover it.
I would love to do that. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, like for example, in basic, I mean, let's cover uh, eggs here. So, or
Okay.
let's just cover chicken in general, since chicken tends to be the most popular meat product purchased in the U.S. I think it's about like 90% of total meat consumption. People often think it's beef, but beef is actually like a small minority of overall meat
All right.
consumption in the U.S. Actually, chicken is far, far more popular of a meat to purchase, mainly because it's also cheaper as well. So, and when you go in the grocery store, obviously you have like a few options. Like you mentioned, you have with chicken meat or broiler chickens, as they're referred to, you have like the cage free and you have the free range, and you probably have like a no label one. It's just like no label. And then rarely, I think at Whole Foods in the like special section, they do occasionally have like a pasture raised chicken from Mary's chickens that they sell, but it's very rare. And I remember they used to be able to order them for you from the meat counter, but I don't know if they do that yet. Most of the times, like you would have to actually go to, companies like primalpastures.com
Oh yeah. Yeah.
or go to like American grassfed.org and go to the bottom of the website and then click on the interactive map and then click on that and then select your state and you can kind of order pasture raised chicken there. And another one is eatwild.com as well. So you can go to the top left tab there, click on there, and it shows you an interactive map of the US and Canada for your Canadian listeners. And then you'll be able to find like legitimate pasture raised operations there.
Oh,
But
nice.
one of the issues I found with poultry products is first and foremost, like chicken is, they're like omnivores. They're meant to eat a very mixed diet of like bugs, seeds. They even eat grass as a supplementary feed as well. And that's how they basically optimize their health, by being like on an omnivore type diet. And like any listeners would know that anytime you kind of give a worm to like a bird, you'll always notice they go after the bugs first in preference to like vegetables or whatever else you might feed them. You know, it's their like main source of feed that they would prefer. But the problem with a lot of commercial operations, which is basically uh, any chicken operation, including at the pasture raised level, is they're just heavily reliant on grains as like a main source of feed. And you do see this a lot on um, labels. So in the grocery store, they do have like a small label that typically says all natural, and then like some other short descriptions like USDA inspected or something like this. And typically they would also say, vegetarian fed somewhere on the
Hmm.
label. And this sounds like really good. And it's referred to as like kind of greenwashing in the
Mm.
agricultural industry. So they kind of throw different labels on there to make it seem like healthy. Because with the Netflix documentaries, and a lot of people would just watch those or watch some kind of like maybe read some very vague articles online. And the majority of people are always made to believe that, like a vegetarian diet is the way you optimize your health. And a lot of people would actually presume that to be true. But then
Right.
obviously, first and foremost, there's a tremendous amount that goes into being healthy outside of your diet, as you've kind of uh, hinted at before. But diet's like one of the main pillars, and you can kind of see that there are a lot of very unhealthy vegetarians, and in fact, a lot of the vegetarians depicted in the documentaries on Netflix, you'll notice, are very overweight. So remember, to be overweight, you need chronic inflammation, a lot of it. And to have chronic inflammation, you need a lot of typically like mental and physical pain in your life to create that chronic inflammation, which leads to the excessive fatness. So, I mean, there we go. Just results speak for themselves right there. And I know a lot of times body fat is seen to just like as an aesthetic issue. And they're like, well, it's okay. If you're okay with just how it looks, then it's totally fine. But for anyone knows, as you know, for anyone knows anything about like health and wellness, it's a reflection of actually like poor health and chronic inflammation that leads to that excessive fatness. Also, possibly high toxicity levels as well, which obviously, your body tries to store away from its visceral
Right.
tissue. And the higher the toxicity level in your body, the more body fat your body will create. But going back to our topic, so it says vegetarian fed on the label, but what vegetarian fed really means is that it's just grain fed. So it's grain fed, and it's most likely just fed like heavy amounts of corn and soy. So a lot of times there are a few issues with this. So first and foremost, um, let's break down the few issues here of what's happening. So first and foremost, you have to remember that uh, like the chicken can't come up with nutrients out of nothing. You know what I mean? So it has to acquire those nutrients from the food. Then you eat the chicken and you require those nutrients from the chicken. So it's kind of like a biomagnification effect. Okay.
Right.
So what happens, basically, how are all, grain, corn, soy, lentils, beans, how are all these products grown? They're all grown through monocropping. And monocropping is like a single crop farming system. So in short, it's basically when you have like acre after acre after acre of the same exact crop. And sometimes your listeners are like, well, what's the problem with that? And let's break down some of the problems with that system. So first and foremost, if you look at the earth and you see the earth as like an apple, and you shave off, I got this from an author, I forgot the author's name off the top of my head, but not my description here, but you shave off 70% of the surface of the apple, that's basically the ocean.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and then you shave off about 15%, that's land that's not able to be farmed for food. So for one reason or another. sometimes the land is too tilted or just not good conditions of the soil or whatever. So you're really just kind of left with 15% of the Earth's surface that's able to be farmed for actual edible food. And maybe 8% or so of the surface is huge metropolitan areas. And usually metropolitan areas, most always, they're developed on very fertile lands. And obviously you have like urban farms here and there in like metropolitan areas, but they're very small and they don't really provide any significant amount of food, though I did volunteer on one, and I think what they're doing is cool, but it's definitely too small to supply like an adequate amount of food. So really you're basically left over with, 5 to 8% of the Earth's surface that's able to be used for crop cultivation. And that's like a very small amount. A lot of people think like, oh,
Yeah.
the Earth's big, it can be grown everywhere, but really it's just not that much land is really available for farming to begin with. And one of the one of the fastest ways to destroy soil quality is just through monocropping. So a lot of times vegetarians would make a argument that, by abstaining from animal products, they are saving the earth, or by eating these meat substitutes like Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, I don't know, whichever other companies are out there, they're actually helping the earth. But remember, all of these products are heavily dependent on usually corn and soy products. You can see that on the back of the label.
Right.
And all these products, all the calories that vegetarians rely on are grown in a monocrop. There's not a single grain. That's basically where they get all their calories, because they're not going to be getting their calories from non-starchy vegetables. That's for sure. You're not going to be able to keep your weight or energy levels high on those. So they got to rely on beans, lentils, grains of various sorts,
Right.
and that is how they're grown, through a monocrop. And a monocrop is destructive to the earth and probably one of the fastest ways to actually destroy the soil quality of farmable land, simply because the earth needs biodiversity. So you can kind of walk out in any forest, for example, or anywhere, and you'll see that you have like a myriad of plants, a myriad of different grass species as well. I know all grass kind of looks the same, but if you walk outside on any grassland, you can find just in a single acre, probably 70, 80 different species of grass on top of
Right.
that. So on top of trees, on top of like 10 different species of birds, probably in that area as well. And then the billions of microorganisms that exist beneath the soil, which are extremely important for the health of the soil. And the only way they kind of thrive is through this biodiversity. So when you start growing like a single crop over and over and over again, what happens is the plants basically become weak.
Mhm.
So the plants become weak, and nature's way of getting rid of weak plants is by setting in pests. So pests don't come after healthy plants. They come after weak plants to kind of get rid of them. So
Right.
obviously, when you're so far indebted in a huge operation like this, you can't kind of turn gears around, do a U-turn, and all of a sudden do like a regenerative farming practices. Because first of all, you're way too heavily invested into that type of business model. And most definitely, you are subsidized by the government as well. And you're just not going to get those subsidies, which are going to hurt your bottom line. Also, like for example, 80% or so of the feed that's required for like an animal operation, for example, is or 80% of the expense for an animal operation is the expense of the feed, which is heavily
Yeah.
subsidized into this corn and soy production, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is then if the farmer isn't willing to change their practices, they're going to rely heavily on synthetic pesticides and synthetic fertilizers to get the crop to, well, first of all, to kill these pesticides and then to get the crop to grow. And the reason they need synthetic fertilizers is because once you put pesticides on these crops, it kills, it kills the pests, but then all these chemicals get on the ground and they kill
Mhm.
all the good microorganisms in the soil as well. And I know these don't seem important, but actually they're the most important thing for sustaining life, because in any plant, like they have a root system, and
Right.
around this root system gathers a specific ratio of like bacteria to fungi that help attract a specific ratio of all sorts of microorganisms like nematodes, etc. For some reason, I'm spacing out on all the
Yeah.
protozoa, nematodes,
It's okay. It's kind of like what
earthworms.
our gut, it's the same as how our gut functions too with the, I always think of the soil as a mirror of that, of because we have to have a diverse amount of bacteria in our gut as well. So the soil is very, very much the same, for plants, right?
Yeah, and basically, I mean, this, like for example, um, the three big macronutrients in crops is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. It really needs it to grow. Those three. It has like a bunch of other ones, but those are like the big ones. It's like fat, carbohydrates, and proteins for you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, so, like, here's how important it is. So, first of all, there's like nitrogen. It's very abundant in the atmosphere. I don't know, like 70 or 80% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. Uh, there's so much available, but the plant can't absorb it directly through the atmosphere into its nutritional profile. So it relies on the bacteria around the root system to basically take the nitrogen from the atmosphere and to process it into ammonia. Then it's eaten by the protozoa and nematodes, and their kind of fecal matter is taken up by other bacteria that then process that into nitrites. And then that is then taken up by more bacteria and processed into nitrates, which is then able to be actually bioavailable for the plant. Then the plant takes it into its nutritional profile. Let's say an animal eats that plant, then you eat that animal, and that's how you gain the nitrogen as well, or
Wow.
any kind of
Yeah.
nutrient. And it
Right.
uses fungi, for example, to gain magnesium from the ground. And obviously, we've heard a lot of articles on, oh, magnesium deficiency, this and that.
Hmm.
One of the
Right.
biggest reasons is in a monocrop, like it's very hard for the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which is a very important aspect of how a typical plant gathers its nutrition to thrive. So
Hmm.
once you start cutting off that arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, the nutritional quality of the plant will suffer greatly. And although they look like big and fluffy in the grocery store, um, what's happening is they're just putting a lot of synthetic fertilizer in there. They just make the plant soak up a lot of water, but
Right.
it's just empty water.
There's
They
no
haven't really,
nutrients. Yeah.
yeah, they haven't really developed a. Honestly, with all this great science, they haven't even really come up with a very effective fertilizer, in my opinion. And that
Yeah.
makes you question. I'm like, well, if they
Huh.
don't even know how to um, create effective fertilizers, maybe it's not a good idea to be messing with human DNA, you know,
That's true.
which is like going from like
Yeah.
basic addition to like high level calculus, in terms of
Yeah.
complexity of the organism.
I feel like fertilizer is already, we already have that dialed in it with manure, right? I mean, it's the best
Yeah.
fertilizer is manure. So why aren't we just using that? You
Yeah,
know?
we have that dialed in because nature has spent already 4.5 billion years dialing that system in, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
So,
Why are we messing
well,
with that? I feel like it's already there. The work is done, like, but of course money is at stake, right? I mean, that's how we uh,
Well,
you
if
know.
anything, the farmers are the ones losing the most money because they have to buy all these synthetic inputs from the
Okay.
chemical companies. Um,
Right, right.
but, like, for example, with a regenerative cattle operation, for example, let's look at it here. So, a lot of times, cattle are demonized for destroying the earth. And the way it's
Mhm.
done in a factory farm environment, it definitely is because, once again, it's relying on grains, which also vegetarians
Right.
rely on as well. So kind of keep that in mind. And all these fake meat products rely on as well. But
Yes.
like, for example, at 5 Bar Beef, like the number 5barbeef.com, I volunteered there for over like a year with the owner of Frank Fitzpatrick. He's been doing it for like 30 or 40 years already. And here's how it goes. You have like a group of cattle, you have them on one plot of land for X amount of months. Then you transition them to another plot of land. And while on that plot of land, they're obviously urinating and pooping on there.
Yes.
That's the fertilizer you're talking about. They're
Yeah.
also laying down and kind of using their hooves to kind of stamp this kind of fertilizer and stuff deep into the ground as well. And then they eat up the grass in that area, which grows in that area already anyways. So you don't need any of that grain input. And we can't eat that grass for food. So keep that in mind. You can't convert it into calories. And then they go
Right.
on to another plot of land, and then another one, and another one. And like a year later, you come back, and that first plot of land they're at has a whole bunch of grass on it again. And you just kind of repeat the cycle. And you could harvest the animals seasonally as well. So now it's 100% self sustaining. So you
Hmm.
don't need any inputs, you don't need any fertilizers or any chemical agriculture. Um, in this case, I mean, how Frank did it, he didn't even need any vaccines or medicines or antibiotics or beta agonists or GMOs or the myriad of other biocides that they use to grow uh, food products, which then make it into the nutritional profile of the animal.
Right.
And then you could just you would get basically like an unlimited supply of meat for yourself. So a single cattle can give you anywhere between 500 to 600 pounds of high quality, 100% supernatural like beef,
Yeah.
which is very nutritious. And then you have the organ content as well. And if you're very picky about vaccines and medicines, like here's what Frank did. He basically started this herd 30 years ago or 40 years ago. I forget the exact time frame. And the cattle that couldn't survive in that environment, as brutal as it sounds, he just let them die out.
Mm.
He let them
Yeah.
die out, and then the strong ones lived on to reproduce kids that were able to thrive in that environment even more. And
Mm.
this cycle repeated over and over again. So now the cattle just don't get sick at all.
That's
They're
amazing.
very healthy and lean. They roam outside 24/7, and they're never kind of put into feedlots or anything. And no vaccines are required, no medicines are required, no antibiotics are required. Uh, so there you go. That's like basically
That's
wild meat, which
incredible.
is the highest quality of meat.
Yeah.
But I know I'm going on crazy tangents here, but going back to the supermarket chicken, what's
Yeah.
happening here is they're getting inferior grain products that also have a myriad of trace amounts of different chemicals or whatever they're using in that
Yeah.
crop. So now the chicken aren't getting, the nutrients. They're also building up bioaccumulating different chemicals they use to grow those grains. And then you're eating that chicken. And if you're, very physically active and athletic, you might be eating that chicken like 3 times a day for
Yeah.
many, many years,
Right.
thinking it's like very healthy for you. And it's probably better than cereal, for example, just to give you a comparison. But there's so much better you could be doing, in terms of like
Right.
uh, high quality food.
And
So
you and I have talked before, and this is mentioned in your book too, about subsidies and how people a lot of times will think, oh, I don't want to spend more for this higher quality food. But yet we are actually spending the same amount in one way or another on the crappier food, right? Because of subsidies. Do you want to talk more about that?
yeah, so this could be broken down into a couple of different categories, and
Hmm.
I'd love to do that because a lot of times um, when I would give grocery store tours, people would be like, "Oh, I don't have like 50 more cents or $1 more to pay for at least like supermarket level organic food, which is a huge upgrade already." And let's break this down. So granted, this was about 4 years ago. So
Hmm.
prices in the grocery store have gone up, but I'm pretty sure the ratio is about the same. So for a 2,000 calorie factory farm diet, and when I say factory farm, I mean industrial agriculture altogether. Okay, so this includes crops and vegetables and fruit, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be about like $7.77 for 2,000 calories a day, which is pretty cheap. And for the equivalent diet with the same macronutrients, same calories, 2,000 calories, it's going to be $12.50 a day. So there is a $5 per day difference that a lot of people would point out. And they're like, see, Eugene, there is a $5 difference. So it's more expensive. That's why I don't do it. However, let's do this. So first and foremost, the average American spends 8 to 16,000 a year on non-essential expenses. And to buy an all organic diet, it's about $4,500 a year. All organic supermarket level diet, 2,000 calories a day. It's about 4,500 a year. But this person is already spending, I guarantee it, on average, 8 to 16,000 a year on non-essential expenses. This includes like Netflix,
Oh,
going out
right.
with coworkers during your lunch hour. Alcohol is a big expense for most Americans. These are the same exact people that would tell you they can't afford organic. Now, what else? So the average American also spends $5,000 to $7,000 a year on medical expenses directly related to poor nutritional choices and lifestyle choices as well. So when you take 8,000, let's go the low end. Let's just be very conservative here.
Hmm.
8,000 a year on non-essential expenses, 5,000 a year on medical expenses. Just that right there is 13,000 a year.
Right.
And those same people are telling you that they can't afford $4,500 a year on all, or at least supermarket level USDA organic certified food from the grocery store. And there is the subsidy variable that you mentioned. That's a very big part of it. So, like how farming works these days in the US for the most part, especially with most products you see at the supermarket, is it's kind of like a vertically integrated system. So let's say you're like a chicken farmer, since we're talking about chicken. And there's a
Hmm.
great book on this called The Meat Racket by, I forgot the author's name, maybe Christopher Leonard. Very, very good book. It kind of reads like a thriller, and farming is kind of like a background theme. And it talks about how these two American business guys named John and Don Tyson created the factory farm model and were able to put like small farmers out of business all across the country. And so it's pretty interesting if you want to know the backstory of how factory farming was created. But basically, vertical integration is like if you're a farmer, um, I come to you, let's say you're independent currently, and I come to you and I'm like, Tyson Foods, and I'll be like, okay, Allison, we're looking for a grower, so someone that could grow chickens, which is what you're doing already, anyways. So the deal is we'll bring like 50,000 hens at the beginning of every month, and you're responsible to grow them to our standards. So if we say they need to be inside all the time, they need to be inside. If we say they need to be given these antibiotics or these drugs or this GMO feed, a genetically modified feed, you need to do that, you know. And in exchange, we have like all the contracts with the supermarkets, we have all the legal team, we have the veterinarians, we have the multi-million dollar slaughter facilities, which you're probably not going to be able to afford on your own,
Hmm.
and are expensive to kind of lease and process your chicken independently. We have all the transportation vehicles, all of that stuff, and we'll take care of all that, including the marketing. And literally, you just have to grow the chickens, and you'll be like, well, that sounds tempting, you know. I can just do what I'm good at, and I don't have to focus on all this other stuff, which I'm not probably that good at anyways.
Right.
And you'd be like, okay, well, deal. And then Tyson Foods would be like, okay, but the only problem is your facility currently is way too small to house 50,000 hens. So you need to take out like a bank loan for about like 250 to $500,000 and build out a bigger facility, and then it will be able to do business. But don't worry, because we have a deal with the bank already. And if you go to the bank and you say you're going to be a contractor with us and do business this way, they will give you the loan, even if your credit is not that great. Okay. And what ends up happening here is now the farmer is heavily in debt.
Mm.
Okay. They're in a lot of debt. And basically, because of the high concentration of what's the word? Not concentration, but basically there aren't that many poultry producers in the US. There are only four.
Oh,
So if it
wow.
doesn't work out, there are only like four or so. So if it doesn't work out with one, they basically, what they do to keep everyone in check is they blacklist you from the industry. So
Oh,
the other ones won't even work with you either. So you're kind of now basically enslaved to these guys and have to follow what they do all the time. And if you go bankrupt, that's okay with them. The bank is going to take your land, your property, and whatever they can't get from you, the taxpayer will pay the difference.
Mm,
So do you see how that works? How private enterprise is using taxpayer money to operate their operations? And then what
yeah.
Tyson Foods does is typically then buy out that what from my understanding, what they do is typically buy out that operation
Mm,
and that they just put their own person in there. And that's how the high amount of consolidation has happened in the industry.
right. Oh my goodness.
So there's that subsidy. And then obviously with regards to our topic here, like corn and soy is heavily subsidized as well. And remember, like 80% of the cost to that type of operation would be the feed to the animal, which is this corn and soy, because they're not operating like Frank Fitzpatrick at 5 Bar Beef, where they're just cycling these cattle
Hmm.
through the grass that's already growing naturally on the ground. They're relying on these grains. And that 80% is subsidized by the taxpayer as well, heavily subsidized. In fact, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I would highly doubt they'll be able to stay in business if these subsidies didn't exist. So
Right.
you can see they're just
Yeah.
really kind of piggybacking off of the taxpayer, which then shows up to the grocery store. They see a slightly lower price and they think, well, it's like $2 or $1 cheaper than this organic brand here. So I am saving money, but really you're kind of not, because you're already paying for that money indirectly, just as like a
Right.
prepayment, you know?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. So that's exactly what I was referring to. But I'm glad that you went through all the other ways that, it kind of balances out, because that is also really good for people to think about and consider. Because really, I mean, we could apply that to anything in our lives, like what, because that's the whole reason I take people through your values first, to getting clear on your values, because that's going to translate into what you spend your money on, what you choose to do, what you prioritize in your life as well. And so getting to the heart of that first is so important for people, because otherwise we're just going to be um, kind of, going about it from a subconscious place, instead of really that deeper awareness of, okay, what are we doing on a daily basis that is affecting our lives, and how can we change that to improve the quality of our lives? And I think the discussion we've had today about food quality, how you can also, I mean, the quality in all areas, like how, what does the quality mean for you as an individual? Is it more valuable to you to have higher quality food in your body? Your body's making, it's repairing from that food, it's making new cells, it's storing energy, and so if it's less toxic, of course, we're going to be healthier. We're going to be, our immune systems will be working much better. Also, the metabolism too, because that's very, very closely linked. So those are all things to consider, whether you're getting healthy, you're losing weight, whatever your goal is, that the food quality is going to be your foundation of that. So thank you so much, Eugene, for sharing that today. That was incredible. I really, really appreciate it. Please share with everybody where they can find your book, as well as you have some programs that you help people with as well. Please share that too.
Yeah, I mean, they can find it on Amazon. It's probably the easiest place to purchase it. You could also find it at Walmart also. Um, that's it. So
Oh,
that's the
great.
only place I sell it. Yeah. I sell it at a few
Mm.
local bookstores,
Do you
but I
have it on
bet
your website too, or?
I do, but it links right back to Amazon. So
Oh, it does. Okay, so
yeah.
better just to go to Amazon.
Yeah. So they can get it from my website too and be teleported right back to Amazon, you know.
Oh, well, yeah, great. Yeah, that's the easiest way to do it. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing this. This is going to help a lot of people. And I love continuing to come back to this subject, because I feel like it's always good to hear again, because, it's something that we forget as we go through this relationship with technology that we have right now. So I really love getting back to the earth, and realizing the gifts that nature has in place. Like everything's already there. All we have to do is just be aware of it and utilize it, And so there's nothing to freak out about. We got it all right in front of us. So thank you for sharing that,
Cool.
Eugene.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Allison. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.